The cafe had been unusually quiet that morning. It was the kind of heavy, oppressive silence that comes not from peace, but from a shared, unspoken fear. Every customer in the room kept their voices low, their laughter contained. The waiters and the baristas, who usually moved with a cheerful, bustling energy, now moved briskly, but with a tense, almost painful carefulness. Even the steady, comforting hum of the massive Italian espresso machine felt subdued, as if it too was afraid of drawing unwanted attention, all because he was there, seated at the best table by the window. A table that was always, without question, reserved for him was Richard Carrington. His name in this city evoked a powerful mixture of a grudging admiration and a very real, very palpable dread. He was a self-made millionaire, a businessman known not for his generosity, but for his brutal, volcanic temper, his breathtaking arrogance, and his impossibly high standards. His presence in the cafe was like a dark gathering, storm cloud that had the power to darken the entire room, and one young waitress, a woman with nothing to lose but her own quiet dignity, was about to walk directly into the eye of that storm. If you believe in the profound power of kindness, in the magic of second chances, and in the quiet, unshakable courage to stand up for what is right, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, Kindness Corner, and share this story. Your support helps us to keep bringing these powerful, life-changing stories to you. Everyone in that cafe, from the manager down to the busboys, knew the stories. They knew how he had once reduced a seasoned veteran employee to tears over a slightly oversteeped cup of tea. They knew how he had publicly and with a great theatrical flourish humiliated the previous manager in front of a packed room of customers. And they knew how he had once made a young, eager barista quit on the spot after a single, minor complaint about the foam on his cappuccino. People feared him, and they had very, very good reason to. On this particular day, Richard was in one of his moods. The staff exchanged nervous, worried glances, silently urging each other to be perfect, to be invisible, to be careful. No one wanted to be the one to become the target of his legendary and very public wrath. When his order finally arrived, his usual a double espresso with a single, precise dash of cinnamon, it took less than a single contemplative sip before his voice, a low, dangerous, and very powerful boom, echoed across the silent room. The sound of his heavy porcelain cup slamming down onto its saucer echoed like a warning shot in the quiet, terrified room. The customers froze, mid-bite. The staff braced themselves for the inevitable, brutal dressing down. The manager, a thin, nervous man with glasses who had dealt with Richard more times than he would ever like to admit, rushed over to the table, his face a mask of a practiced and very pathetic apologetic smile. But Richard wasn't satisfied with simple apologies. He demanded to know who had made the coffee, demanded to know who had approved it, and he demanded to know why the standards in this once respectable establishment had fallen so embarrassingly, so pitifully low. His words were laced with a cold, deliberate cruelty, cutting through the air like 1,000 tiny, sharp knives. The barista who was responsible, a young, pimply-faced boy in his first month on the job, stood pale and silent behind the counter, looking as if he were about to be physically sick with terror, and that was when she appeared. Emily. She was not, yet familiar with the unspoken and very important rule of staying completely and utterly invisible whenever Richard Carrington was in the room. Emily had seen her fair share of rude, entitled customers before, but something about the way Richard was so publicly, so gleefully berating the staff, especially the terrified and very young barista, stirred something deep within her. She had been raised by a strong, proud, and very kind single mother, a woman who had taught her from a very young age that respect was not a privilege that was earned by wealth or by power. It was a basic human courtesy that every single person deserved. Standing in the corner of the room, her heart pounding, a new and very different kind of rhythm in her chest, Emily took a deep, steadying breath, and she began to step forward. The entire cafe, it seemed, held its collective breath as she approached Richard Carrington's table. The other waiters, her own colleagues, looked on in a wide-eyed, silent horror. No one, absolutely no one, ever interfered when he was like this. It was unthinkable. But Emily didn't hesitate. She set the heavy tray of steaming cappuccinos down on a nearby empty table and stood up straight. Her posture no longer that of a humble, invisible waitress, but of a woman who was about to speak her own, very powerful truth. Her eyes, which were full of a quiet and very dangerous fire, met his without a single, solitary trace of fear. I show, calmly, and with a profound, almost regal dignity, informed him that the way he was speaking to the staff, to her colleagues, was completely and utterly unacceptable. The room, which had been filled with the low, ugly murmur of Richard's tirade just moments before, fell into a new and even more profound stunned silence. Richard, momentarily caught completely off guard by her audacity, just stared at her, his own mind struggling to process what was happening. No one, absolutely no one, in his entire, powerful, and very insulated life ever spoke to him like that. His expression, which had been one of a smug, cruel satisfaction, now hardened, his eyes narrowing as he prepared to lash out, to unleash the full, devastating force of his legendary, volcanic wrath upon this insignificant and very foolish young woman. But Emily's voice, when she spoke again, did not waver. She reminded him, in a tone that was not angry, but full of a simple and very powerful truth, that behind every single cup of coffee, behind every plate of food, was a real, living, breathing person, a person who was just trying their best, that mistakes sometimes happen, and that a person's dignity should not be a luxury that is reserved only for the wealthy. She pointed out, not with a personal, angry accusation, but with an undeniable and very public statement of fact, that his own cruel, very public behavior said far, far more about him than a simple and very correctable cup of coffee ever could. Every single word she spoke, so simple and so direct, hit the silent room with a quiet and very profound force. The other customers, who had previously been shrinking in their seats, trying to become invisible themselves, now began to look at Emily with a new and very dawning sense of awe. Richard's own face flushed a deep, painful, and very unfamiliar red. But instead of exploding, instead of the volcanic eruption of rage that everyone in that room was so desperately and so fearfully bracing themselves for, he fell silent. Something about Emily's tone so firm, so respectful, and so completely and utterly unshaken had disarmed him. For the very first time in years, he was being faced not with a cowering, terrified fear, but with a quiet, powerful, and very real strength. A strength that wouldn't back down, and yet a strength that did not, for a single moment, disrespect him as a human being. The room remained tense, every single person in that cafe waiting, with a bated and very bated breath for his response. Then, in an almost imperceptible and very shocking shift, Richard Carrington, the tyrant of table 7, leaned back in his chair, and he asked for a fresh cup of coffee. His voice, while it was still sharp, now lacked the cruel, venomous poison it had held just moments before. Emily nodded, a single, graceful, and very dignified gesture. "Thank you for your patience, sir," she said, and then she walked back to the counter with the same quiet, powerful composure she had entered with in the weeks that followed that one single, transformative morning. Something remarkable and very unexpected happened. Richard Carrington returned to the cafe, as he always did, his presence a long-standing and very profitable morning ritual. But his demeanor, his very presence in the room, had changed. He was still demanding. He was still precise. Cruel, cutting, and very public, verbal assaults were gone. Sometimes he would even, to the utter astonishment of the entire staff, offer a small, quiet, and very genuine compliment on the service, something that no one in that cafe could ever remember him doing before. The staff, in turn, began to relax. The oppressive, soul-crushing tension that had once hung over the cafe like a thick, heavy fog on the mornings he came in, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to dissolve. And though Richard Carrington never openly or formally apologized for his past behavior, everyone in that room, from the manager down to the busboys, knew exactly what had caused this profound and very welcome shift. One young, unassuming waitress had dared to stand up to him. And in doing so, she had changed. Not just his behavior, but the entire and once toxic atmosphere of the cafe. Emily never sought any recognition for what she had done. She simply continued her work, greeting every single customer with the same quiet warmth, treating all of her coworkers with a new and very real kindness, and handling each and every day with a quiet, powerful, and very beautiful strength. But among the staff, she had become something of a legend. And the other, wealthy and often very powerful, customers who had witnessed the event on that fateful day still spoke of it. Not as a moment of a tense and very public conflict, but as the day that someone had finally, and with a great and very quiet dignity, reminded everyone, millionaire or not, that respect is always and must always be a two-way street. For a man who had spent so many years of his life intimidating others into a fearful, resentful silence that, for Richard Carrington, was a profound and very life-changing lesson. A lesson that had been delivered not by a business rival, not by a corporate board, but by a quiet, brave, and very unassuming waitress in a small, sunlit cafe. On an ordinary Monday morning, in the months that followed, the story of that one single morning in the cafe became a quiet local legend. And the changes it had sparked were not temporary. They were real, and they were lasting. Richard Carrington still came to the cafe every single morning. He was still precise. He was still demanding. But he was no longer cruel. And one day, he did something that no one, not even Emily, could have ever expected. He waited until after the morning rush, until the cafe had settled into its quiet midday rhythm. He called Emily over to his table. Emily was speechless, but Richard wasn't finished. And another thing, he said, pushing a second, smaller envelope across the table. This is a full and unconditional scholarship fund for you to go back to school, to finish your degree, to become the person you were always meant to be. Tears, hot and silent, began to stream down Emily's face. Not tears of sadness or of humiliation, but tears of a profound and very overwhelming joy. She had stood up to a bully, not for a reward, not for a promotion, but simply because it was the right thing to do. And now her single quiet act of courage had changed everything. And so, a waitress, with a quiet strength and an unshakable sense of her own self-worth, had not just changed the heart of one bitter, lonely man. She had changed her own life and the lives of everyone around her. She had proven that true power is not about wealth or about status. It is about the quiet and often unseen courage to stand up, to speak out, and to treat every single person, no matter who they are, with dignity and with respect. Final hooks. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Corner. These stories exist to remind us all of the incredible, transformative power of courage, of compassion, and of the profound and very beautiful act of simply standing up for what is right. And before you go, we have a special request. Please, comment below and share your own thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or even experienced a moment when someone stood up for what was right, especially against someone who was powerful? Your story might be the very one to inspire someone else. Today, thank you for watching.